Tell me who you are and why you're in my garage.
I'm Jared Erondu. I have no idea why I'm in your garage. I imagine it's because I met you a few years ago. You were very helpful to me. I try to be helpful to you. And when you want to try new things out, you tend to ask me to help out.
I do, don't I?
Yeah.
And you're very receptive to that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Right on. Where are you from?
I'm from New York, and I moved here from Baltimore 3 years ago.
Okay. And you're pretty young.
Yeah.
At least to me, I'm 32.
Relative.
How old are you?
I'm 21.
21.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're 21 years old. You've already been the creative director at a company like Teespring, who makes millions of dollars. What is that like? I mean, there's a lot of young designers out there, you know, and they aspire to be, you know, at a place like you years from now, not let alone at the age of 21.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. How was that process? What was it like to be a 21-year-old creative director at a company like Teespring?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing was I tried not to focus on it too much, and I tried not to have other people focus on it too much.
Yeah.
So much so that even before Teespring, before Omada Health, like before San Francisco, I actually used to hide my age for a long time. So my profile photo on like Twitter or any social media used to be like a silhouette. It was like the half shot of my face. I mean, at first it was to hide both race and age. And then after a while, I just forgot about it. It was like, you know, just age. Yeah. Then after a while, you know, it just became my face. But I also have, I'm told, like just 3 or 4 year older face. So I was always able to like mask it a little bit.
Wait, older face?
Yeah.
I think you have a baby face.
You actually, I have a photo on Instagram. It was like my first photo that was just my face publicly. And you were the first person to comment on it and you said baby face.
Nice.
But like I said in the beginning, it's all relative. But for me, it was always like reminding myself that like, yes, I'm in a very unique position. And I always felt blessed to like be able to do what I'm doing at my age and at this point in my life and career. But I never, like knowing that as you do your job, it can affect you in one of two ways if you let it. One, it could be, and both are actually negative. So one is it makes you feel like an intruder, like you're not supposed to be there. Like somehow you put on some facade unbeknownst to yourself that convinced other people that you are who you're not actually, right? And then
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. And like every day you're like fighting against that. The other side of that spectrum, which is also bad, is ego, right? All of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm better than everyone here because I'm at their level or past it before them or whatnot, right? Or before, they were able to. And it's funny, like I said, both are negative, both are bad, but it's like your perception of yourself. One is like more pessimistic and then one is like overly optimistic, and it's trying to like just keep yourself in the middle. And from the first 6 months, that's what I was trying to do, just try and like keep myself in the middle, not try and talk about it, but not try and beat myself up to think that like I'm not supposed to be here, right? But then 6 months in, I realized that I was approaching the whole thing incorrectly. It didn't really matter about that spectrum. It just mattered about my job, right? I reminded myself that the reason why I was in that position is because of past experiences, but also just conversations with Walker, Teespring CEO, absolutely. Right? Like when I spoke with him, I was telling him what I thought about the company, what the company could be, and what I can bring to the table. And he was telling me where he wants to take the company and where he sees me fitting in. Right. So just like how I made the decision that I can contribute, he also made the decision that he feels that I can contribute as well, right? Nice. So me to feel that like I'm not supposed to be there or that I'm better than what I was given is me saying that he was a liar or didn't know what he was talking about. Right. And me saying that in that moment that I met him, I was also a liar, right? And neither of those situations were true. So, obviously I dealt with it, like, I loved everyone at the company, but things happen. Yeah. But generally speaking, 6 months in, I realized where my focus should be. It should be on my work. The first thing I did there was redesign the logo. Nice. It was more like a cleanup.
Yeah. Because originally I contracted with Teespring and early on with Walker, and Sean Farrell.
Yep.
Originally created kind of the first kind of rebrand or whatever, but you touched it up, cleaned it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool. And then put it out there.
Yeah.
That was really quick.
Yeah, right.
It was fun because back then we were like 20, 30 people. and then started building a design team. My first hire, who now leads design.
And you
there.
were doing the hiring because
Yeah.
you're creative director, you're in charge of the
Yeah.
team, you're doing
Yeah.
the hiring. Okay.
So my first hire was Josh Rotino.
Nice.
He's still there. He's now the head. And then made a few more hires. We had a graphic design team in Providence, and then product design was all here in San Francisco. These were like two of like the hubs out of what became 5 offices. And then I spent a year and a half. I worked on a lot of the buyer-facing things. Some rolled out, some are probably still rolling out. And then a lot of, I would call system design on the seller side, you know, so building the foundations of our dashboard that enabled a lot of features that were built to help our sellers sell more.
Right.
And, you know, after a year and a half, you know, Teespring had grown from, say, 20, 30 people to probably around like 400, 500.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy to think about.
That is crazy.
I mean, in the SF office, it was 100 of us, and we knew each other's names. But when interns would come, like, you don't know who's an intern versus who's not. And, like, it became pretty interesting, but that's just growth, and that's a good sign. But yeah, after a year and a half, I felt like what I had come to the company to do, I did. I did to the best of my ability, help them understand where design fits into product, and the fact that it's a tactic or a strategy to help a business like fulfill its goals, and not some coat of paint that you throw in at the last second, right? And what I wanted to do next to the company, and I had this conversation with my manager and with the CEO, was not necessarily a priority for the company for at least the next 6 months. So it was a trade-off of, you know, continue to manage and like build the team as needed, and wait until that opportunity to do the next thing that excited me, or call it a day, put in my card and say that, you know, I've done what I've come here to do.
Totally.
And I chose the latter primarily because I also wanted to give myself a break after work, because I think up until then I had not taken a vacation. So
nice.
Yeah.
Which is easy to do, easy to just kind of stay in the work. That's actually why I started Epicurrence, by the way, was because when I went full time, I've been freelance forever. I went full time and realized how hard it was to take time off, you know, because you're so focused, especially when you're full time somewhere. Like, you have all these people, this whole team that you know have to be accountable with, and it's really hard to take some breaks. So I totally hear that. Okay, so when you were being the young designer, the young creative director, was it challenging, like hiring a team? Because I can see like me coming in, you interviewing me right now, you know, being a lot older than you are for a design position. I don't know if I would be intimidated by it, or there's some kind of feeling there, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel anything, or have anyone, any interviewee kind of like, you know, say something or anything? Like, how was that process?
No, didn't really have any issues. I think part of it is just like social psychology. I mean, I didn't study it, but I was always very interested in it.
You're very good at it.
I remember my dad did it, and he had like books laying around at home, and I was reading like, you know, a college psychology book when I was like 10, right?
It's so crazy.
I think I actually read that book cover to cover like twice. And it's not manipulation. It's just more understanding how the mind works, and putting to bed as early as possible in the conversation any beliefs or misunderstandings the person may have, right? Because, I mean, how I would always like pitch it to them is like, look, this is like, first of all, I'm not begging you to join, right? But I'm also not going to play hard to get, right? This is what Teespring's doing. This is our mission. This is what we need help on. This is what I identify as your skill set. Correct me if I'm wrong. First of all, is this even interesting to you? And if it is, what do you want to do here, right? Not even caring too much about what they did in the past, because I had made that mistake once in my career, and like actually probably twice or 3 times, of, you know, gauging someone's potential at a new opportunity based off of their past efforts, and it hardly ever translates, right? Interesting.
Can you elaborate on that at all?
Sure. Like, you know, even me, you know, like I have my portfolio, it's pretty dated, but like if someone reaches out to me, it's because of past work, and they're like, we want you to do that here, right? And it's like, well, either I don't do that anymore, or that's dated, or I've grown so much since then that like for you to think that is what I'm now capable of, I now have to correct you on that, right? That's just like one interpretation of it. Then two, it's like maybe you're just looking for a new opportunity. And then three, the environment is not the same, right? Like, you know, if you want to do like a science experiment, you have to have a control group. You have to test this thing 3 or 4 times. If you take any designer, their experiences at their past 3 opportunities never align. Right? You have some crossover, but the crossover tends to be social psychology, right? Like, you know, my relationship with my manager, or like my relationship with my team, or my connection to exec. Those are the things that tend to overlap as good experiences or bad experiences.
Right.
But the actual work and process hardly ever overlap, right? So to me, to gauge your ability to do good work at my company or the company that I'm working at or hiring you into, I can only take your past experience with a grain of salt, right? I mean, which is kind of like how Silicon Valley operates anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's how I was able to make it into this industry. Like I didn't go to college. It wasn't that I didn't get in. Like I chose to take a different route.
Right.
But this is one of like
conversation.
this is one of like the few industries where, you know, not having Stanford or MIT or CMU on your resume does not dampen your chances of getting a job or significantly impact your salary.
Right.
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 So
Exactly.
likewise, your past experience should not dictate your credibility or the lack thereof. You know?
That's so true. I'm glad you brought up the school thing, because obviously you're still 21, so you didn't go to college.
Technically still be at
You should
school.
still be in school.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I graduated until I was 22. Is
Yeah,
that
like
kinda
21,
how old
22.
you
Yeah.
are? So I went to a 4-year design school, and then I moved out here. So technically, you're 3 years ahead of me already, kind of to where I was at your age. What was that decision like? Because, yeah, that's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Do you go to school or do you just start your career already?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of people are facing this, right? Do I
Yeah.
go to school? Do I pay all this money to go to school and pay for it for a long time, you
Yeah.
know? Or I just go ahead and start my career, you know, get real life learnings. How did you figure that out?
So I have an older brother. We have like a 12-year age gap, so he's 33.
Nice.
He's married, lives in New York, works in banking. Before that, he worked at like the CIA. So
He's
like,
on Wall Street, right?
So completely different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Right? Well-educated, bachelor's, master's, probably even PhD. I don't know. I'll ask. But you know, growing up, like he was always like my role model. Like I didn't get to live with him too much because of the age gap. By the time I was like 6, he was off to college.
Yeah.
But you know, I always felt like I'd follow in his shoes. And when college time came, not even college time, like probably like 9th or 10th grade, like I was still gunning for college, right? The schools I wanted to go to were, you know, like Columbia, my mom's alma mater, or UPenn. I can't remember schools in that northeast area, but you know, I remember when 9th grade or whenever it came around, that's when I really started understanding the potential of the web and what it enabled me to do. Like for the first time in my life, like I could just hack something together, put it in front of people and get like instant feedback.
Nice.
And up until then, that was not a possibility. So for me, it started as writing. So I didn't even originate as a designer. I was more of a writer because English class was like that one class in school where your teacher could not, well, if it was a creative writing assignment, they couldn't grade you on anything other than grammar, right? They couldn't grade you if your idea was foreign to them, right? And I wanted to explore that outside, so I did. And then I started a blog, and no one read it. I started another blog, no one read that and all. But it was fun, right? And then I started learning about this design thing. I didn't know exactly what it was. At first, all I saw was graphic design. I knew I didn't want to do that in particular. Further, you know, a couple years down the line, I gradually defined what would become my title, product designer. But I started researching, like, okay, well, how do I explore this, right? And like, how do I learn how to do this quickly? And the only thing that was available to me was like articles and, you know, download this PSD and reverse engineer it in Photoshop kind of stuff, right? There was no track that I can find in universities. The closest thing was like a program at RISD or MICA, which I applied. I applied to MICA, but I didn't go. I got in, but I didn't go. But, after a while, I started having conversations with my parents, and my dad, in particular, noticed my tone start changing from like this really, really excited, he's going to go, at the time I was pretty good at IT. And I actually had like a Cisco CCNA certification.
Right.
And
right.
I was gonna go do computer science and
That's
all that.
cool.
Right. And he started noticing like I was talking less and less about IT and like less and less about that stuff and more about like design and like, empathy and like the hell is that, right? It's like what's going on? And I remember one day I was just like, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna do what all my classmates are doing. Mom, dad, I don't think I'm going to go to college. They thought I lost it. I probably did because in a week or two, I kind of pulled it back and said maybe I'm not going to skip the whole thing altogether. Maybe I'll just put it off for a year or two, right? And around this time, I also started a blog with my friend Drew Wilson called The Industry.
Right.
And this blog beginning had no readers, but then all of a sudden it was 10,000 viewers a month,
quick.
100,000 viewers a month, right? And then we started a podcast with Adam Stacoviak. And we were having designers on. I think our first guy was Chris Coyer. Our second episode was just Dan Cederholm, Dribble founder. And they were defining for me this kind of design that I was seeking, but I didn't know what it was, right? And then I met Ryan Carson, the founder of Treehouse. And we had a conversation. And all of a sudden I joined Treehouse from my bedroom in Baltimore.
Dude,
right?
For some reason I thought you were at Treehouse before all that. But
no.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. And I joined as an editor. This was really early Treehouse. So this was 10 people.
Crazy.
Yeah, this was when Treehouse had just spun out of Think Vitamin memberships. And I mean, the point of Treehouse was you don't have to go to college to learn this stuff, right? And I remember we had an offsite, well, not an offsite. We would have check-ins in the Treehouse, then HQ in Florida. And I flew down there and after dinner, Ryan and I are walking down the street. We were joking because I was the youngest person at the company. I was 16 or something. I had to get it's some form that you have to get signed by your parents or whatnot in order to work, to collect the pay. Because
Dude.
But we're walking down the street and he's telling me, he's so-and-so told me that you're still thinking about going to college. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, but you work at Treehouse. He's the whole point of the company is for people like you to not have to go to college.
Right?
What are you going for, right? And I remember I came back and I told my parents, I was like, Mom, Dad, basically my boss said I shouldn't go to college, right? And they're like, I don't think that's what he told you because he went to college, right? And that's how that began. But,
so funny.
fast forward, basically I made a decision with my parents. I was like, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to take, at the time I was I can't even remember anymore. I was enrolled to either go to Drexel or UPenn. They were side by side in Pennsylvania. And I told them I'll take a semester off and I will start doing stuff, right? At the time I had left Treehouse. Treehouse was more almost like a contract summer gig, basically. And I told them, I'll take a break and just do stuff. And around that time I started an email app called EvoMail with two co-founders. And who were much older than me, and I told my parents, look, I'm building this thing, we would cut builds and I'd put it on their iPad and I'm like, you can touch it, we built that, imagine other people using this, Mom and Dad, and they finally, bit into it and they were like, okay, we'll give you 6 months, right? Yeah. 6 months came. My promise to them was at the end of the 6 months, the app would be live, millions of people would have downloaded it, and I'd retire them or something, right? 6 months later, we were still working on the app, obviously, right, as tech goes. Around that time, we also started figuring out who our competition was. Our biggest one was Mailbox. That's how I actually got to know the Mailbox people, Gentry and L. And I told my parents, hey, I need a refresher. Give me another 6 months. And what happened was, in that next 6 months, we launched EvoMail. Kind of took off, ultimately failed, but lessons learned. And somehow, I ended up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
My parents didn't understand when I arrived in San Francisco, I was never coming back, though.
Yeah.
So
I had that same story, I told my parents, it'll be a year, and then I'll be back.
Yeah.
No, I'm 10 years later, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Now with my whole family out here.
It's you come home during Christmas, it's when are you coming back?
Yeah, right? You're young, you're a person of color. Let's talk about diversity a little bit.
Sure.
What was that like? Gosh, yeah. So being so young and African American, did you see like double issues when you're either freelancing, talking to clients, or trying to get hired at different places, or any interview process or whatever? Anything in the design world, right? Was it harder for you? Did you experience anything differently because of your age and skin color?
Sure. So age always played like less of a factor because it's not instantly obvious.
Right.
Like I can have like
even though the baby face.
Yeah, I could be like 30. I could be like 38 with like a baby face.
Yeah.
And, I'm tall, so like that also like kind of like
counterbalances
counterbalances the baby face,
definitely
right?
That helps.
Now, African American, that's obvious, right? Like you see, you just know. It's not like I got like a super bad tan. So that's always like a touchy subject. Like I noticed that really diversity at work and all that, gender and race diversity, really started taking off on 2014, 2015. I think like Medium helped amplify that conversation.
Really? Yeah.
A lot.
It was a Medium.
A lot of people have asked me, but I have to date never written on the topic.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, I haven't written in a while, period, but like...
This is true.
I haven't. And it's partly because I don't like saying something until like I have a concrete way of looking at it that I can honestly defend.
Sure.
2, I don't want to be a victim. And 3, I don't want to hate on other races.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's really hard to define a speech, a talk, an article, even a tweet storm that like checks all those boxes.
Sure.
One of them is going to be vacant, and people are going to like just destroy you for that, right? And one might say, well, isn't that just being like a coward or something? And no, I don't see it that way. I think it's like just being smart, really. Like if it's like, okay, well, if you approach this like a design project, it's like the first thing is like, what's the purpose? Like, why are you writing in the first place, right? Like, are you just writing because like you're black, so you have to say something? Or are you writing because you want to change the conversation? Or are you writing because you want to actually make change, right? And for me, I feel that the only way I can do any of the latter two is to make sure that when people read whatever it is that I wrote or hear whatever it is that I said, that they only see it for the merit of the words I chose rather than the boxes I like left unfilled, right? Does that make sense?
No, it totally does.
So it's like,
totally does.
Because I know that if I leave any one of those things vacant, it's just going to be another Medium post, or like another blog article, right? And it's not that like when I come out with mine, if I ever do that, it's like, oh shit, now it's like, this is what we're supposed to do, right? Yeah. But I want to actually add to the conversation in a meaningful way. But to answer your question directly, yes, I experienced some things. I don't really talk about them much because, I mean, my perception is like, the people that I had such interactions with, like there's only so much blame you can put on them. Like part of it is really just environment. Like I grew up in like, Brooklyn in the 90s and like completely different place than today. And, walking down the street as like a black kid, like, if anyone that's not your race sees you, like they grab their kids or they grab their bag or like sometimes they cross the street. They don't want to walk on the same side as you. And you, honestly, it's sad, but like you get used to it. So even today, it still happens a lot less. Probably because I wear like Oxford button-ups. So it's like, maybe I don't have to clench my purse as hard. But, it's sad, but yeah, you get used to it. But for me, it's also learning not to like despise the individual, but really trying to not empathize with them really, but just understand what would have led them to think that way, right? Sure. Because it's really hard to actually fundamentally change a racist perception, right? Like first you have to break it down as like, where does this date back to, and like we all know where it dates back to, right? And then, you know, what have been your experiences growing up? Like, you know, what were your parents saying when like they see one on the street, or like, you know, what were your parents instructing you to do when you go down to the corner store? Like, you know, don't walk in that side, and all those things. It's like, it's especially, you know, 0 to 7 is like the period in a child's life where like they define their perception of the world, really, right? Yeah. And in those years, if this is embedded in their mind, it's like trying to teach old dog new tricks, like when they're 20 or in their 30s. And for me, it's just kind of like just not reacting too quickly, because if you do, then, you know, you're fighting fire with fire, and nothing good comes out of that. Yeah. But 2, just reminding myself that for every one of them, there's another person, 2, 3, 5, 6 other individuals who don't think like them, right? So if this is a client, like, I'm not going to try and fight that client and, you know, get in contact with their boss or whatever it is. I'm just like, okay, I'm just not working with you guys. Yeah. For, you know, there's another company down the street who's probably going to do it better than you anyway. I'm going to go with them, right? Nice. You know, if it's like in a restaurant or like a bartender or whatever it is, like there's another one, or there's a whole bunch of bars in San Francisco, right? Like for every scenario, there's a way to, you know, just acknowledge that individual as like, yes, I heard what you said, and you can see from my expression that like, no, that's bad, right? This interaction is over, on to the next one, right? I don't think that like I can fix people, right? So it's not like, okay, you're my new project, I'm going to change your perception. Granted, I've had some encounters like that where it actually came out to be a good situation, but like pretty rare, right? But you know, for like other African Americans in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, I don't know. We don't have like, if people wonder, there's no like designers or like tech people of San Francisco who are black, like clubs, where it's like we meet up on a monthly basis and talk about our issues. I don't know, maybe there should be, but like I know some of them, and any interaction we ever get, like it's the same thing, and like, you know, we end up laughing about it, but and it is sad, but yeah, I would say though that this industry is a lot nicer about it. Nice. Than just about any other.
Good. No, that's really good to know. Yeah. I was going to ask you, you know, it is a hot topic. Yeah. Right now, especially, you know, like you said, starting in 2014, especially last year. I know I realized it a lot more last year. You know, I've been freelance for a long time, and I haven't really ever experienced the kind of diversity with teams in a way, just because I just work for myself. You know, I'm at home, locked in my office. You know, I just see my family all day. But when I went full time at Lux Valet, and I had to do some hiring, you know, I kind of realized it a little bit more and started to hear more about the subject and whatnot. I'm just curious, like when you were hiring, because you were hiring at Teespring, which we talked about earlier, was diversity on your mind? I mean, this was probably, a year and a half ago? So I know it wasn't like a major topic like it is today, but I'm just curious, was that on your mind at all? How did you approach that, if it was?
So it was on my mind. I feel like there's a whole bunch of ways it can be on someone's mind, and most of them are bad. So like the first one is like, it's like, I didn't do this, but people do. It's like you have a mental quota, right? So it's like, okay, we're gonna have a team of 10, so I want at least 3 of them, or like 4 of them to be females, or, you know, let's get like 2 African Americans and like, you know, maybe like 2 or 3 Asians and like 3 or 4 like Caucasians. Like, that's terrible approach, right? Because what ends up happening is, well, you hurt everyone. One, the people who are not minorities, honestly, it's like if they now have become the minority, right? Because it's like now when they come in, there's a higher bar that they have to pass in order for them to actually, it's like, oh, you're right. Like you have to like really kill it so that like, you know, like we can't have all white people, right? And then on the minority side, now they don't know if they're getting hired because they're good or because you want to hit a quota, right? So for me, my approach for diversity was like, look, there is a pool of talent. In San Francisco in particular, it's heavily skewed towards white males, right? So if you're only picking from the pool of San Francisco, don't fool yourself into thinking that you're going to end up with the most diverse team, right? So what does that say? Well, let's find another pool. Well, guess what? There's the rest of the world, right? And you can pick from them, right? Because it's like having like 5 golf balls, say 10 golf balls, and like 2 of them are black and like the rest are white, and you have to make a team of 5 people, right? I mean, just math is going to say that like no matter what, at least 60% of them are going to be white golf balls, right? But the 2 black golf balls, maybe neither of them belong in your team or belong in like your collection of balls, right? It's like, I mean, but you get where I'm coming from there. So it's like, if it's like it should, if that's your pool, it's just math tells you what your team, what every possible outcome of your team will be, right? If you're like, okay, I'm going to like Dick's Sporting Goods or whatever it is, and like they have like all the golf balls in the world, all the different colors, and you're like, whatever your measurement is, like if it's the weight of the ball or like it's balance or whatever it is, like you have all these things to pick from now, right? Like you can put on like a glasses, go colorblind, and just like go pick, and then pick 5, pick 10, right? And like you take your glasses off, maybe they're all white, doesn't matter. At least you were fair to all of them, right? Maybe it's equally split. You have one of each color or whatever it is. It doesn't matter, right? So for me, like, okay, I could break it down. Like, so the team before it extended and before I left and like some of us left, the original 6 designers at Teespring, it was 1 female, 5 males. In terms of race, there were 3 Caucasians, one of which was a female, 1 African American, myself, 1 Hispanic, and 1 Middle Eastern, right? That was the breakdown. So by diversity check boxes, I kind of filled it, right? Yeah. It wasn't my intention though, right? Like the female, I met her through a friend. Like so Watsi worked out of Teespring's office back in the early days, and one of the members, Netta, I love her. She was like, hey, I have a friend. She's at Yahoo. She's looking for a new gig. She's really talented. Like actually, she didn't even mention the gender. She just said, I have a friend who's at Yahoo, really talented. Would you be down to meet the person? Sure. She didn't reveal any information. I met Vanessa at Sight Glass, where I met everyone, right? Like we had a good conversation. I liked where her head was at. She was interested in the product. We continued the conversation, brought her in. She interviewed with myself. She interviewed with Josh. She interviewed with the team, different members of the team, our CEO. Everyone came back and said, this is a good hire. So we hired her, right? Because she did good work and because we felt that she can contribute. Didn't matter what her race was. Didn't matter what her gender was, right? I wasn't thinking, because like by that point, it was Josh, myself, and her. So like even still, it was like heavily men, right? But my intention was not like, oh, my 4th hire now has to be a female, so it could be 50-50. Because like I said, I never even ended up hiring another female, right? But it wasn't like, okay, I have to, or I can't hire males or whatnot. It was just like, look, this is talent. These are people who can contribute. Let's go and find them, right? Out of the 6 of us, 2 of us didn't come from San Francisco. 1, Pedro, came from Chicago, and 2, Kyle came from LA, right? Kyle started as a contractor, and then we brought him on full time, right? Before I left, like I was looking at 2 other people. One was in Sweden, and then the other one was in where was he? Egypt, nice. Right? Like obviously we're gonna run into issues with visa, right? But yeah, like I found them just by chance. They were talented. One was a female, one was a male. Didn't matter to me, right? Nice. And that's always been my approach. So I don't know. Maybe people don't agree with that. Maybe I said something here that like someone's gonna like Twitter blast me for. I don't really care, right? My thing is, at the end of the day, if I'm sleeping, it's not something that's gonna keep me up at night. Like my approach, right? Being, I'm not going to sleep like, did I like weigh that guy a little bit too heavily, or did I weigh her a little bit too heavily, or this? No, because I try. I'm not perfect. I'm not like, I don't have like some like way of thinking that like no one else has. But I just try my best to not really care about those things, right? Nice. Because if you're good, awesome. If you're not good, doesn't matter what your skin color is, or what your gender is, or what like your sexual orientation is. It just really does not matter.
If you have any more advice for young designers again, trying to either make the move to San Francisco. Should they make the move to San Francisco? It seemed to be working out pretty well for you. And I guess with that, should they go to school? What do you think about design school? And yeah, just any advice to young designers today?
Sure. So the topic of San Francisco is a catalyst, right? So if you have potential and if you have drive, you come here, it's going to help speed up the inevitable.
But you need both.
Exactly.
Yes.
If you don't have either,
I agree with that, yeah.
you know, if you put a catalyst to like the air is not going to move any faster, right? So if you bring someone here who has no drive and has no skill,
right,
and you put them in San Francisco, doesn't matter if they're surrounded by the smartest people,
right,
nothing's ever going to change,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so catalyst. On the topic of college, I've always said to people when they ask this is the decision to not go to college is like a college in itself, right? So for me, when I weighed that option of not going, I treated it as a university in itself, right? So it's like, do I want to go to the University of Pennsylvania, or do I want to go to the University of Life, basically, right? And it's like you're weighing the same thing, like what's the price, what's the ROI, right? What's the years that I'll have to invest before I see, you know, the benefits.
Sure. For the record, so I'm 32 now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still paying for my college.
On the record,
Just saying that.
Yeah.
And you're not paying for college at all.
No.
You're 21.
And you know, what are the trade-offs? So obviously, when you go to a university, if you're still maturing, that's very helpful because like it's the last bit of years really that you're surrounded by your age group. Like when I came out here, like I kissed goodbye to like my age group basically, right? Obviously, there are people around my age group.
That's true. So how did you make friends out there? I mean, because obviously everyone's older than you.
Yeah.
I mean, like we have a 10-year age gap
Yeah.
between us.
I mean, I just got, I guess, lucky in finding people who didn't really care.
That's cool.
But obviously, the funny part was like evening times they always leave me because they would go to bars and I couldn't. I always get lonely around 9 p.m.
Awesome.
But yeah, like you know, you have trade-offs. So like when you go into the workforce or University of Life, like you are saying that you are ready to be surrounded by older people, right? People who have already done what you are about to do for the first time, and like there's more accountability, like there's more things to pay for, etc. And when you go to college, you're saying that you're still in the learning mode where you want some sort of accountability by your professors, by your peers, and all that. So yeah, like my advice to students is never like don't go, like you know, screw college or whatnot, right? Yeah. For some people, it still helps. Like I remember I was having a chat with my mom like a few weeks ago, and she's like, you know, if you were, she knows she's given up now that I'm not going to go, but like she still holds on like a 1%, like oh, maybe one day. But she's like, you know, like if you were to go today, like what would you study? And I'm like, probably psychology or something.
Nice.
Like, you know, it could still help me because like psychology, teaching how the brain works, that's very crucial, especially as like interfaces are getting smaller and disappearing. It's even more crucial to understand how the brain works, right? Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, that'd be beneficial. Like if someone's like, hey, should I go to college or go to this? I'm like, well, what is your understanding of the space right now? Maybe there is a beneficial course for you in said college, right? Or maybe you're just ready to jump in, right? So obviously it's not the best answer, but the main takeaway is like, it varies person to person. First of all, you have to have some sense of self-awareness to know what are your weaks and what are your strengths. Because if you are putting yourself in a situation that you won't succeed in, you will not succeed, right? And for some people that means go to college, and for some people that means you don't need it. You've already learned those things. And then on the topic of just like getting into design, I think the biggest thing that's going to be crucial for like the next generation of designers is realizing that what you see on Dribble's popular page is not all design is, right? That's not hating on Dribble at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
I love
like,
Dribble.
I still love that thing.
Yeah.
I don't post, but like I definitely browse it.
You actually don't
right?
post, dude. What's up with that?
I posted 30 times ever. It's kind of funny. Well, 34. But you know, for me, like, so on, you know, since I left Teespring, I've been contracting and doing some advising with some startups. Predominantly early stage, and trying to get these founders to understand the value of design and why they should invest in it early. And the thing I always tell them is design is really like a mindset, right? the people who you hire with that title, you're hiring them to carry out that mindset the duration that they're at the company, right? But that's not to say that they're not the only people within the org who can think that way. It can start with the CEO, and if it does, it tends to have good benefits to the design team because they're closer to the conversation and decision making. But regardless, for the designer, they also need to have that mindset coming into the industry for the first time, or else they're just going to be, they're just going to confirm the belief of anyone who currently does not understand design as it's just this thing that's colorful and pretty, right? Yeah. So the first thing I always tell them is like, understand the very basic concept of intent versus outcome, right? It's like intent is what is that user or what is that person coming here to do? Outcome is what are they expecting when they're done doing that thing? And whatever your product is, your hope is to either match that outcome or exceed that outcome, right? And if you exceed that outcome, whatever that lift is, that whatever that delta is your brand, is what people come back for, right? So you look at products who've successfully been able to do this. Uber has mapped themselves in between the intent of getting from point A to point B and the intent of leaving point A and the outcome of arriving at point B, right? Now, like when you think you have to get down the street sometimes, it's like, should I Uber, right? And like when you want to get like a small bit of information out to a whole bunch of people, you think Twitter, right? When you think you need to get a lot of information out to a bunch of people, you think Medium, right? Like in reality, you take any of these tools away, you would still be able to do those things. But these are brands and these are products who've successfully understood that, right? So for a designer, it's like, okay, well, how can you position your work and how can you position your company to do that? And it starts with empathy because you have to understand the intent of the user. If you never talk to your user, or never watch them or interact with them, you will never fully understand what outcome they're trying to seek, right? And then you'll go and chase down this avenue and everyone will be convinced that this is where you're supposed to go. And then guess what? This is the outcome without your product. And then this is where your product ends up, right? So why would anyone want to use this, right? So that's the first thing in terms of like how you should be thinking about things. And then the other one, which is really big in my personal experience, is the understanding of process, right? Not what process is the best process. I've seen so many articles covering this, but more so understanding that process is just there to help you achieve something in a structured and guided and measurable way, right? You have too much process though when it gets in the way of productivity. So you tend to see designers like signing up like, okay, like everyone's using Wake or Envision or Sketch or this or that, and like every new thing that comes out on Product Hunt, they need to try it out because it's like maybe this is gonna like make everything better. And none of these tools are gonna do that. They're just tools, right? And when you understand that like these things, like in all honesty, some people are able to pull off design without any of them, right? When you understand that, then you start to realize what design actually is, right? It's not anything with the tools, it's helping achieve an outcome, right? And that starts with understanding the people you're trying to build that outcome for.
Totally.
So, if you go to college to learn this, awesome. If you go to life to learn this, awesome. If you end up in San Francisco to learn this, awesome. If you end up in Detroit to learn this, awesome, right? But all these things are not going to decide the outcome of your ability to do design if you do not even understand that one fundamental thing.
Totally.
Right?
Dude, that's awesome. Okay, just to wrap up, so what's next for Jared?
Sure.
What's next?
Yeah. So I was contracting for a company called Copper last year.
Wait, was?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. This is almost its color. That's funny. I ended up joining that company basically this month, January 2016.
Congrats.
Thanks. As like employee number 1 or 2, it's like 3 of us, which is fun. It's been a long time since I've worked on a team that small. And what we're trying to do is we're setting out to do away with the concept of the password. Pretty ambitious, but I feel like it's inevitable. I feel like I believe that my kids and my grandkids are going to be growing up reading Urban Dictionary to find out what the hell Grandpa meant when he said password. It's like, what? Wait, you used to type in, Grandpa, like you could get hacked? It's like, I know. That's awesome. What we had to do for a long time, right? Awesome. And without getting into too much detail, not that it's like private or whatnot, just like for time. How the product works is, just imagine you went to, say, Kickstarter.com and you clicked sign up and Copper appeared. And Copper's like, hey, Kickstarter wants your name, your picture, your email address, and your number to create your account. Do you want to continue as Dan Petty? and you click continue as Dan Petty, and then you have a Kickstarter account.
Dude,
your picture
just
shows
like
up
that.
there, your name shows up there. Maybe you're not Dan Petty, so you click switch accounts, or I'm not Dan
That's
Petty,
awesome.
and you tell us who you are, and then you're in. Obviously, there's a lot of tech infrastructure that goes into enabling that, and a lot of things that goes into making sure it's secure. But the three main values for the company is serendipity, ownership, and security. Obviously, we won't use those words public facing because that's just typical Silicon Valley lingo. But on the serendipity side, the key piece for us there is ubiquity. Like, so wherever our users are, we're going to be there. So for the start, we want to cover the web and cover iOS. But long term, we want to be able to cover things like Apple TV and like VR. You know, like typing in information into a sign-up form on a computer is annoying, but you can get it done. On an iPhone, it's a little bit worse because the keyboard's smaller. On the Apple TV, it's even worse because it's this stupid small remote. And on VR, like, what the hell would that even look like, right? But the goal is to be there, right? And then for ownership is really how we're going to separate our brand from other people in the space, like sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google, sign in with Twitter, where these companies at the end of the day are ad businesses, right? And for Twitter and Facebook, they're social. So, you know, there's the fear there of like, is my information going to service their ad business? And is my information going to be shared with my friends or a social graph, right? The fact that Copper just solely exists to do this one thing, we are trying to eliminate that fear of like, it's your information, you own it. We only ever share information with a service that you okay. So in that scenario where it says continue as Dan Petty, you will actually see beneath what we call the ID, where it shows the picture that you're about to share with Kickstarter, the number, the name, etc.
Nice.
And you can remove access and say, actually, I don't want to share my address with Kickstarter, and Kickstarter won't have it, right? But then it also allows us to enable things like, imagine you move, or your credit card expires and you want to update that information in your Copper. When you update it with us, we propagate it to all the services. So imagine like going back to Amazon and like that annoyance of like having to change your address or shipping it to the place you just moved from, not happening. Because when you arrive there, Copper recognized and put it there, right?
Dude, it's awesome.
And then likewise on the developer side, all the information you share with Copper, we have you verify. So your number, we verify 4-digit PIN, email, verify via a link. Address, physical address, we actually take that opportunity to verify actually by sending you something in the mail, a nice little keepsake, t-shirt, thank you message, handwritten, do things that don't scale, and you scan a QR, we verified that, right? So now when you're signing up for a service with Copper, you don't get that annoying email that says click this link to verify, because in their database, the developer is reading it as, you know, Dan yell at danpetty.com _verified.
Yeah.
So they don't have to send you that email,
That's awesome.
right? Or when you connect your phone number, they don't have to send you that PIN. Or when they want to ship you something, they know it's your actual address.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more things we want to enable down the line, but that's where we want to start.
Dude, that's super cool.
And the key piece
powerful.
is no password.
Yeah, dude, that's
No
awesome.
password.
That's the best part.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, right on, Jared. Thank you for coming by, man.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And yeah, look forward to hanging out and talking.
Yeah.